Welcome to another episode of the Millennial Gems podcast. My name is Accrual McIntosh. I am a certified QuickBooks Pro advisor, and I help business owners organize their financial transactions. So today we're going to talk about cash basis accounting versus accrual accounting and which one is best for your business. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, if you're a finance enthusiast, if you're an up-and-coming bookkeeper, this episode is for you. So let's get right into it. First, we're going to talk about cash basis accounting. So by definition, it's when revenue and expenses are recorded when money is physically received or paid. So the perfect example you can use is if you invoice a client this month in January and they don't pay you until February, the revenue is going to be recorded in February. That's when you're recorded at, that's when it's going to be recorded as money received, as payment to your business in February. That's how the cash basis accounting method works. So what are the pros of this method here? First thing is simple to understand and it's easy to manage. If you're a small business owner, if you're a sole proprietor, it's a pretty straightforward, operations, of this method. It's very easy to understand, very easy to finagle. Second thing, it's easy to track and have a clear picture of cash flow. You're always going to have a direct view of how much cash is on hand and how much is available, how much capital you have. Lastly, it's cost effective. It doesn't take up too much of your time, requires very little resources, and sometimes it may often eliminate the need for a bookkeeper, but I still wouldn't neglect getting a bookkeeper regardless of how small your business is. I would still get a bookkeeper so that way you can still focus on growing and scaling your business rather than doing this. I mean, you could probably do it at first you can do both because you probably won't have a lot of transactions, but as you continue to grow, you're going to want to get a bookkeeper, so that way you can focus on growth and scaling, which I've talked about in past episodes. All right. So what are some cons of using the cash basis accounting method? Well, it does provide an inaccurate financial picture. So you can't really forecast or identify trends or do trend analysis because your revenue and expenses don't get accounted for until it gets exchanged. So it's not like the accrual method. I'll talk about it when we get to accrual, but that's essentially what it is. It doesn't give a good, financial picture because the money is not accounted for until it gets exchanged, whatever month that is, no matter how long it is. It is limiting to the growth of your business, which makes it hard to track accounts receivable and accounts payable. So just quickly, accounts receivable is when, somebody owes money to your business, whether it's like a good or service, but it isn't paid for upfront. So, and the same thing with accounts payable, which is inversely money you owe to somebody for a good or service, but the money isn't paid upfront. It gets paid when, the money is counted for when it occurs, which again, like I said, I'll get into that when we talk about accrual. And then lastly, it's just non-compliant with GAAP or GAAP is how I pronounce it, which is just the general accepted accounting principle. And this is just simply, a set of standards and rules used by larger companies to make sure, they're preparing and reporting their financial statements, accurately. So typically larger businesses won't really use the cash basis accounting method because they're trying to attract investors and secure funding. And this method isn't going to work for, larger businesses. Now, for accrual accounting, by definition, this is when the revenue is recorded when earned and expenses are recorded when incurred, regardless when the money is exchanged. So the example here is, again, you invoice a client this month in January. The revenue will be recorded in January, even if the payment arrives in February or March. So you saw with cash basis that when an invoice is issued in January and it's not paid till February, it's accounted for in February when it's exchanged. But accrual, if it happens, if you send an invoice in January and it's not paid until February, March, then the money is accounted for, the revenue is accounted for in January. So what are the pros of using the accrual method? Well, it does provide an accurate financial picture because it gives you a complete visual of your business's financial performances, your business's financial performance by recording the revenue and expenses when they occur. So again, not when it's exchanged, not when the job is finished, when the job occurs. Which then also can lead to better financial planning because now you can track accounts receivable, you can track accounts payable, you can start forecasting and, start enabling trends analysis, using a trend analysis. So this will allow you to, kind of see like what your business has the potential to make next month and probably the month after that, because the money is recognized as you were paid in January. So that's kind of like how this method works here versus like the cash basis method where when you're paid, that money is accounted for February. So that's considered money you received in February. But with accrual, any money you incurred, any invoice you incurred for in January, that revenue is accounted for in January, even if you don't get paid or the job isn't finished until March. And then lastly, accrual method, it is required for certain businesses. So businesses that are, exceeding, a certain threshold, or if you're a product-based business that has, inventory, accrual method is definitely the best method for you. Now, what are the cons of using the accrual method? So it can be complex and time consuming. It does require a lot more record keeping and understanding of accounting principles. Hence why you should have a bookkeeper. Hire a bookkeeper. As I told you at the top of this episode here, I am a certified QuickBooks Pro advisor. So if you need help with your bookkeeping, feel free to check out the link in the description that will give you a link to schedule a free consultation to see if we're a good fit. It does provide cash flow challenges because you can't track cash when it's available. So it could make it seem that as if your business is profitable, but you are going to have, insufficient funds for expenses. Because again, you have to remember that for the accrual, the money is accounted for in the same month that it was incurred. So if you request an invoice and it's incurred in January, the revenue is considered it was paid in January, even though the job hasn't been finished yet and you haven't been paid out yet until maybe March or so. And then lastly, the higher costs. because of this method, because of the complexity of this method and, what it entails, you're definitely going to need professional services for this method. No ifs, ands, or buts. You need a bookkeeper. You need an accountant. You need somebody to do this method because if you try to do it on your own, you're probably going to mess it up, which is going to mess up your business's numbers and might make you non-compliant with tax regulations, and we don't want that. So, how do you choose what method is right for your business? Well, first things first, what's the size of your business and the complexity? Again, kind of as I said at the top when I was talking about cash basis accounting, if your business is if you're a small business, if you're a sole proprietor, single member, LLC that's, not being taxed as an S corp, or as a C corp, then you typically can use the cash basis method because it's, again, fairly simple and very easily understood and manageable. And then if you're a larger business, you're going to want to utilize the accrual method. The industry type. So typically if you're, heavy into inventory, if your business is heavily inventory based, accrual method by far is the best bet. Now, if you're in a service-based business, like what I do, like, bookkeeping, then accounting, taxes and stuff like that, then you're going to want to use maybe the cash basis method because, you're expecting payment to happen when the job is finished. For growth, if you have growth and future plans. So if you have any inclination to grow your business to a point where you want it, publicly traded, then the accrual method is definitely the best. You have intentions to have investors. If you have intentions to secure loans, you need to be using the accrual method. But larger businesses need to use that. And then lastly, tax reporting and compliance. Again, like I said, if the business exceeds, the revenue thresholds of more than 25 million, then accrual method definitely has to be used. And again, that's typically going to apply for more so like the publicly traded businesses, so even if you're making, you're making less than 25 million, you can probably still elect to use the cash basis method. But again, you kind of just use your discretion of which works better for you. Again, if you're like a product-based business, like a heavy inventory, you probably want to use the accrual method. But definitely for sure, if you're exceeding 25 million in your business and revenue, then you don't have a choice but to use the accrual method. It has to be used. All right. So that's today's episode. If you do need a bookkeeper for your business, again, I will leave it down in the description, and you guys can comment. Feel free to schedule a consultation, to schedule an appointment with me, so that way we can figure out, if we're a good fit for each other. You can also follow me, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow me on Threads, Instagram, and Fanbase at Official A Killer. Again, I will leave all these down in the description. And then lastly, check out the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other, podcast platform that you may listen to. All right. So it's been another episode. I'll see you all in the next one.